Can you do a 3D immersion by managing 2 or more avatars, like with the example of twins?
Yes, you can. The person needs some prior training, but technically, more than one body can be handled at the same time. Yes, it happens like with twins.
How and when an experience in immersion is designed? For example, being in a mountain, alpinism.
If it is a playful immersion, just for entertainment, it can be designed just before. Or the immersion can be designed while it is in progress. In this case, you're fully aware that you are immersed.
Do all interstellar races have immersion programs?
Yes, practically all or all. Technology goes hand in hand with interstellar travel technology. It's all about frequency management, both for space travel and brainwave manipulation for immersions.
What components does the liquid have that you use for immersions?
It is a neutral liquid designed to provide both nutrients as well as oxygen and CO2, which passes through a filter and sensors that constantly measure the quality of the liquid. The content is changed according to what is necessary, and it is controlled by computer. It's basically artificial amniotic fluid. In the case of medical pods, it also contains stem cells.
I have no memory, but I feel strange in this reality. How could I know that I am in immersion?
It is just an inner knowledge. In this case, you would need confirmation from someone who controls or has access to your immersion information. But in itself, it is an internal knowledge that something is not quite right. You know it inside. You feel it.
Is there any way to know in 3D that you have another body? That you are in 5D immersion, in addition to feeling it intuitively?
You feel it intuitively, yes. It is something you know inside. From there on out, there is nothing that can reveal that to you directly.
Do all starseeds enter the Earth through immersion, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. Some starseeds enter from the source like anyone else. In fact, most starseeds enter naturally.
Is there any way to know if a person has left his body and has been a portal for a person in immersion?
Yes, it is a sudden change of personality, of personal interests. The person is perceived as clearly different. In itself, it is easy to detect in this case. The incoming person will still keep the memory of the previous one, but will have other skills, interests, will speak other languages. The family will notice the change and will say that something strange has happened to him or her. But it depends on each case, because some are discreet and they know they are walk-ins in immersion, and they're careful not to be seen as obvious.
Are there designs or templates, so to speak, for the experience you want?
Yes, there are templates and shared experiences. This is very common. So much so that this is the explanation for people who claim to have been the same person. Classic example being of the people who swear to have been Napoleon in their past life. Life experiences can be reused if they give the contextual framework for the current experience.
Is there any difference between incarnating from the source and an immersion in terms of experiences?
It is reported that yes, there's a lot of difference, being that those who enter through immersion say that everything feels more false, Those that enter from the source in a natural way feel everything more real. This is important because it separates normal people and the immersed starseeds with regards to their experience.
If you go to the source and you are in immersion, then could you return to your body in the pod?
No, if you're immersed and something happens to you, an accident, or you die, you first wake up in your normal immersion body. You're not going to the source. You wake up in your 5D body.
If everything is planned before the immersion, why do it if you already know everything that you are going to experience?
That is why you forget, to be able to have the experience of what you have designed. It is one thing to design an experience, and another is to live it firsthand. Another thing is that during the very immersion, you can change the results.
If someone is immersed and is a walk-in, how does the veil of forgetfulness affect them?
It affects you differently. The veil of forgetfulness in the case of the immersion can be completely removed, leaving 100% memory of being immersed. Or it can be adjusted to some range of remembering 75%, for example. Or have complete forgetfulness that you are immersed.
How could we know that we are in immersion pod? Could it be known by astral travel?
Yes, it could be known by astral travel or by deep hypnosis. It is a good way to get more data.
When a person with epilepsy has seizures, could it be avatar updates that are made when in immersion from that other plane, especially when sleeping?
Rather than updates, a glitch in the system. Yes, exactly. This is already classified as an immersion problem, compatibility problem between body frequency and incoming signal.
Where are the immersion pods located and who maintains them?
They are either in immersion facilities on the home planets or in orbiting spacecraft. They are cared for by the crew, family, and friends of those in the immersion chambers.
Can you wake up in immersion from 3D?
Yes, the most obvious way is when the subject's life process has ended. You can also do it by deep hypnosis, preferably with guided help. This is not usual.
If you are not in immersion, when you die and go to another density, do you have to be born again? Or can you take another body?
Being already in the astral, you do not lose consciousness of who you are. Rather, your consciousness expands on all things. You don't have to reincarnate if you don't want to, or you can reincarnate in another body, all according to your frequency, which are your thoughts.
Do the energy therapies as pranic healing work?
Yes, they work. It depends on each person and how sensitive they are to treatment, but they do work. I recommend them indeed. If a person is skeptical, it won't work.
Why risk entering 3D with their physical body when they could do it through immersion pod?
Most of the ETs do enter Earth using a human bio-body immersion. Even so, yes, they enter directly, taking a risk. It would seem illogical, but it is a question of ethics of the non-human person presenting yourself as you are.
Being in the immersion, can you be in different timelines and densities? If so, why is it necessary to store the body in the pod? Sleep and dream, it seems to me that it is the same.
Yes, you can be in different timelines and densities, The body is stored only because the subject wishes to return to it and continue his or her life.
What is the natural state of a consciousness or soul outside of a body? Is it pure energy? And with what senses does it perceive its reality?
In itself, we're always pure energy, being that bodies are only a sustained idea. So, we're always just one mind. That is energy. And you have other kinds of bodies, of other kinds of densities. You do, always according to the frequency of thought and ideas of the person.
What happens if the immersion machines fail while in them?
They have redundant systems. However, they're not perfect. If the machine were to fail catastrophically, the person would wake up from the immersion. In 3D, it would look like a sudden death of the barely explainable kind, and for sure would be attributed to the bug again. I mean that half as a joke.
I had a very strange experience where a great pain in the belly suddenly became intolerable, and I saw myself out of the body, and it was hard to enter again. Is this a failure of the immersion?
Yes, it would be an immersion failure, or it could be something like a program trigger in your unconscious that has caused you to lucid dream or astral travel.
Anyone who has access to immersion could enter the 3D momentarily, remembering that they are in immersion, and generate a body in 3D and interact with others just a few hours?
Yes, anyone with access to the system can do it. The system is secure.
When you wake up from the immersion, do you share your experience with others?
Yes, the memory in that case is complete.
Being in immersion, can you have different bodies prepared for you, designed, in different densities to enter them when you want or need, from your 3D attention?
Yes, you have more than one body, although the usual is only one, or two. Sometimes, if one body fails or is removed, the other body can be accessed. This is done by some politicians.
Will the vaccine affect the signal of the starseed in immersion?
Definitely yes, it will change and stop the signal to the degree that it will cause signal failure, death, and with that, the person will wake up again in the immersion pod. This is very important.
How would the vaccine affect your body in 5D immersion?
Your body in 5D immersion would only be affected by the experiences and ideas you have as a result of your immersion in 3D. But strictly speaking, the syringe will not affect the 5D body.
What happens to the person if they are in immersion pod which gets destroyed by an accident?
If it's just system failure, the person in 5D immersion would wake up, causing sudden death in 3D. But if the pod is completely destroyed with everything and body inside, the person will die in both 3D and 5D, leaving the subject's consciousness returning to source again.
How is the biological body adapted to breathe liquid in the pod without choking?
The human body breathes liquid for 9 months. It will remember how to breathe liquid. Once inside, you can breathe normally. It just takes more work to put the liquid in and remove it from the lungs. But it is compensated with greater efficiency of oxygen and CO2 transportation. Yes, you have an ugly feeling that you're drowning. They tell me it feels horrible, but you don't drown. You finally breathe in the liquid, and that's it.
Is the time lapsed in an immersion pod the same as here in 3D? That is to say, 80 years here, how much would it be there in 5D?
Time doesn't correspond. In itself, it's on the side of the immersion pod and 5D body. Much less time elapses than the time as experienced in 3D. In other words, 5 years in immersion would be equivalent to a lifetime in 3D. Time varies. The feeling of passing time is variable and depends on each person.
Does the body in immersion have a periodic maintenance, like a change or renewal of fluids?
Yes, the change or renewal of fluids is constant, and it is not done every so often, but the content of the liquid that recirculates through filters constantly varies, and it is constantly replaced by the system.
If my 3D body is failing, can I ask to exit the immersion?
Yes, many people in immersion are supposed to have a contact for a certain amount of time, depending on how they feel on Earth. Staying longer than planned can cause 3D body failure. This is reported by Dale Harder precisely.
How long can people who are in dry immersion be on Earth?
Those who are in dry ones, again, time is relative to each person. Usually, if it's dry, it is only used to enter for about a day, and then they return to consciousness. Then they will go back into 3D another day again. They don't stay there in 3D like in liquid immersion. In other words, you just enter the dry program and do something, a mission or a few days in 3D, and return to your 5D body again.
If we wish to have the memories of a previous life, would our body in the immersion pod be affected?
It wouldn't be affected. In itself, when exiting the immersion in 5D, everything is experienced during the immersion is always remembered without any problem.
If the body operated in the immersion becomes defective, will they help from the 5D?
Yes, the body will be helped from 5D, but there is a limit to what can be done remotely. In itself, for that, the Grey Gardeners do some abductions to fix the problems of the 3D body so that the immersion or the life of the incarnated subject from the source can go ahead as planned.
Can any person enter the immersion? Or do you need to be from the Taigetan Special Forces, entering for a mission or also for fun? Thanks.
It depends on the mission or life project, whether or not they need to have prior training. Yes, such training is necessary many times, but in itself, just to use the immersion, it is not necessary to have any previous training. Just to understand the process well and have a clear objective or life plan.
Couldn't it be the case that the person decides to stay in the 3D incarnation even though the pod has been destroyed? Doesn't the decision where to stay depend on the consciousness of the person?
In this case, since the signal is being artificially diverted by the immersion pod, you can't stay in 3D just because you want to. Only if you had a mind or consciousness of very high frequency and strength. But I have no information to support that you could stay in 3D without the pod if it fails.
Are the Starseeds with Down syndrome also in immersion? Or is it another experience?
They can be. It is not something that it is excluded. It is just another life experience. Yes, they could be immersed.
Does it have something to do with dreaming that I am underwater and can't breathe?
If it can have something to do with it, interesting dream.
Can you enter an immersion pod to live an experience on a higher plane than 3D or 5D?
Yes, you can, but the experience will not be complete. It will just be as a 5D rendering of a higher plane. But as a game experience, yes, you can.
What energy sustains the pod?
The pods are maintained with electrical energy fed by the 0-point network.
How is it possible to know or intuit if a person is in an immersion pod if they received many vaccines as a young child?
It depends on the vaccine. Triple viral is the worst vaccine until the appearance of the current one against the bug. It interferes with the operation of the signal between the pod and the 3D body. In itself, we argue the vaccines, among other things, are to stop the entry of advanced beings from 5D to 3D Earth. Very good question.
Do immersion pods operate on energy like Tesla?
Yes, it is Tesla's, called Tesla, free energy.
What time difference is there on Earth being in dry and in wet one?
It depends on each immersed person. The temporal perception will always be relative. In the dry pod, where they are in 3D for only short periods of time, the difference will be minimal. It can be almost the same amount of time, but if it is a wet one, the difference is very big.
What do you feel the moment you get into the immersion pod? And how do I know if I am immersed?
I have never gone into long-term immersion, just games without tripod, but I'm told that they just fall asleep, getting more and more sleepy until they fall asleep, and begin to like dream once within the immersion experience.
Is this technology already perfected for you, or do you feel that you can even advance more? What faults do you feel it has?
We feel that you can always refine it more. We're already at the advancement point that in some immersions you don't even need to have a pod, but you can get immersed right where you are on the ship. This is how I experience it here, from my room included, but they're only entertainment, and you enter and exit this type of immersion at will. The main flaws are the incompatibility of the 3D body with the pod signal in the 5D. I also have reports that the more time one spends in the 3D immersion, the further the signal moves away, being that the longer the immersion is, the more signal failures it will have. Also, failures in the filtering system, but for that we have redundant systems. Failures are not usual though.
What would happen if the two bodies, the Earth one and the immersion body, met?
Nothing would happen. If it happened, you can also be in 5D immersion while being in 5D, or be in 3D immersion and take a ship, go to 5D and visit your body asleep in the pod.
How do they locate the body here? And what happens when multiple people get immersed into that body?
The body has already been previously identified. The bodies have implants that identify them. It is possible to put several in one body, and it is not highly recommended because it is related to multiple personalities and schizophrenia.
At what temperature is the body kept in the pod?
It depends on the species, but the temperature is varied as the body needs it. For Taygeta, it is usually around 36 degrees Celsius, since we are generally 1 degree Celsius colder in temperature than humans.
Does the sudden loss of knowledge have any relationship with an awakening in the immersion pod?
Yes, it could be a system failure, or simply a failure of the 3D body itself.
Do all the starseeds on Earth come through immersion?
Most have come directly from the source, but in the last 20 years, the immersion types have increased exponentially.
What type of telepathy have you used with humans? Classic or artificial telepathy? Is there any difference for the one who receives the message?
Both kinds of telepathy have been used, synthetic and natural. For ethics reasons, we use the natural one, or we just use the synthetic to enhance the natural. Nowadays, we prefer direct contact even if it's through these means.
When in immersion pods, are abductions necessary?
If there is a failure in the 3D body, yes, there needs to be an abduction to correct the problem in question.
Would the failure of the lunar matrix affect an avatar on Earth in immersion in 5D?
In the case of immersed people, the influence of the moon on the system is very little.
Dale Harder said to remember a scene in which he literally had to jump out of the ship to come here. How exactly does that work?
Yes, that's what he told us. That is his interpretation and his experience, but it differs from person to person. However, having to jump to 3D is quite usual. More than one person reports that. Entering a dark hole too, but not all people experience the same.
Do you know anything about the Serapeum of Saqqara? The giant sarcophags of Egypt? Could they be immersion pods or antediluvian medical pods?
That's another topic. They're not immersion pods. They're capacitor holders for 0-point energy.
And what about the bodily needs? How is it done?
Subject does not relieve itself, defecate or urinate inside the immersion pod. It doesn't happen in the dry one because he or she isn't long there. And in the wet either because the body is in suspended animation. The nutrients pass through the liquid and it has nothing to do with the gastric system.
The immersion pod is like a technological copy of your higher self projected from above to the being who is here?
No, nothing to do with your higher self. It simply diverts your attention point to another avatar, leaving the original saved for later use, but you are still yourself.
Are souls that are not part of the Federation allowed to enter Earth in immersion or reincarnation? Or is there an issue of jurisdiction?
Yes, there is an issue of jurisdiction, but I know that even so, non-Federation souls do enter, especially directly from the source.
Does remembering to be inside the mother before birth have to do with the immersion pod?
It is not directly related. That kind of memory is common. the memory of breathing water. It may be an indication of wet immersion. Thank you all very much for being here. I send you a lot of love. Take care of yourselves a lot. I love you all. Thank you for following our videos and messages. We do everything possible to help you in whatever way we can. Stay strong and never stop believing in yourselves. You're powerful. You're valuable. Never forget that. I love you much. Until soon, Anéeka.